Hi everybody, my name is Rosemarie Cramer. I work for the Netherlands Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. I work on zero emission zones in the Netherlands, and especially the international aspects of that. For example, trying to increase the demand for vehicle availability of zero emission zones, which is a great challenge for the zero emission zones. It is a great place to work, and I'm happy that the world is changing more and more into that zero emission direction. So I'm happy I can contribute to the e-course. The pathway to zero emission zones is actually twofold. On the one hand, city logistics have, of course, grown enormously over the last few decades, and that increased the need for more livable cities, fewer trucks, also cleaner air, obviously. So what happened in 2014 is that companies, governmental organizations, research institutions, they have all agreed upon a Green Deal zero emission city logistics. And together they worked on regional pilots to avoid shift and improve city logistics. But a second development is the Paris Agreement. And this national climate agreement contains 5 sectoral agreements, of which mobility is one. And for mobility, we have agreed to reduce 7.4 megaton CO2 by 2030. And while zero emission zones are expected to lead to 1 megaton CO2 reduction yearly. So that's quite a lot of that mobility goal. And well, currently what we see is that zero emission technologies are still under development, but especially for the short distances, the technology is ready. And that is one of the reasons that cities are at the forefront of this transition, and that zero emission zones for freight has become one of our priorities. Yeah, the Netherlands is actually the first country in the world to give its cities the freedom to implement a zero emission zone. And local governments are really responsible for their own zero emission zone. They have the mandate, they have the theoretical basis. And for example, they decide where the zero emission zone lays. And of course, each city has very different characteristics. So it's good. It's also good that the cities have the freedom on their own to decide it on their own. And the national government, on the other hand, is responsible for clear goal setting, for harmonization, and many things need to be done together with all the cities. So that's where the national government really takes the lead. And those are things such as deciding upon a starting date, road signs, very practical, enforcement. So you want road users to have the same rules and regulations in each city. But also the national government is also arranging incentives for companies, for example. And they do decide on which aspects customization may take place. One of the things that will be decided on a national level, because you want to have it very clear for road users that they don't have different rules in Amsterdam, for example, compared to Rotterdam, that road users know what kind of vehicle they should invest in. And yeah, as it says, zero emission zones, it's really a zone for zero emission vehicles. So that's only vehicles without any emissions. One of the points that is not decided yet at this moment is plug-in hybrid vehicles, because they can be zero emission when they enter the zone. So that is technically spoken zero emission, but it is not completely fitting the roadmap towards the Paris Agreement goals in 2050. So that's still one of the things that is to be decided by the national governments, for example. Yeah, what we see is that many local authorities, many municipalities have actually limited time and capacity to organize such a big thing as a zero emission zone. And so expert advice can really help them a lot. And the SPES program provides expert knowledge to cities in the field of, for example, logistics or juridical affairs, process support, but also research and also preparation and the enhancement of the local decision making. And And the SPES experts, they get in contact with many different cities, and they can really share their lessons learned with other cities. Also, one of the aspects of SPES is that the cities can get financial support if they decide to implement such a zero emission zone. So those are things that are very, very advantageous for local authorities. Yeah, well, the goal is to have 30 or 40 cities having a zero emission zone in 2025. And currently, I believe we have 27 cities that have actually announced their ambition for such a zone, and 22 of those have already made their principal decision. And what we see is that this number is growing as the national government is providing a more advanced and clearer framework. So they really need those, they really need to know the clear regulations from the government, and that really helps them to make that decision. And the process that a city has to go through is, well, it is quite complex, but just to explain the basics of that, is that it starts with obviously a motivation, a vision, some argumentation. And after that, they will draw the current and the foreseen situation. They speak with stakeholders and start running pilots. And the next step, if that is finished, the next step is the development of an action plan in collaboration with the stakeholders. So it's really important to keep working together between public and private parties. And also part of that action plan is the actual location of the zero emission zone. And after that, we have some formal things to do that will be the council decision and the traffic regulation order. And if that is all finished, then they are actually ready to implement such a zone. So it's quite a big deal to organize it, and it really takes a couple of years. But as we see that there are so many cities working on it at the same time and at the same pace, they can really help each other out on that. Yeah, well, one of the things that might be interesting to mention is the challenges that we are currently facing. So there are many things that are going into a good direction, but there are a few things which are really challenging us, and that's mostly the charging infrastructure and also the availability of zero emission vehicles. And I think on those points, we really need international collaboration, and it really will help us and also other cities if more cities decide to implement such a zero emission zone, because the more cities are working on that, the easier the collaboration is, because there's more knowledge, there are more experts, but also the demand for zero emission vehicles will rise, and that will lead to accelerated developments in the zero emission technologies and also to more supply of zero emission vehicles. So as a last point, I really encourage more cities to choose for a zero emission zone.